All right, today we're going to tear down and rebuild a really powerful blueprint for learning. This is a method that's all about making new knowledge actually stick in your brain. We're going to break down how it works and maybe more importantly, why it works so incredibly well.
But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to learn a new, kind of complicated word? You know the drill. You read it, you look it up, you nod and think, okay, got it. And then like a week later, poof, it's just gone. Why is that? Why are some words just so slippery? And this right here is the heart of the problem, isn't it? It's not that you don't get it in that moment. You see the definition, it clicks, it makes perfect sense, but there is a huge, huge gap between that temporary nod of understanding and really, truly owning that word's meaning for the long haul. So yeah, let's just give it a name. Let's call it the forgettable word problem, because it's a totally universal feeling for anyone who's ever tried to build their vocabulary or get their head around a big idea. And it's the exact problem we're going to tackle today. Because what if I told you the secret isn't some fancy, expensive app or, hours of grueling flashcards? What if the whole strategy, the entire key, was tucked away inside a single, beautifully crafted prompt? Well, that's exactly what we have here. We're looking at a prompt that is so much more than just a request for some content. It's basically a master plan for learning effectively. So let's deconstruct it piece by piece and see what makes it tick. The whole thing starts with a really bold mission. This isn't about learning simple words. No, it's aiming high. It's targeting advanced learners and diving headfirst into the toughest topics out there. These big, abstract ideas from politics, philosophy, and psychology. It sets the bar high from the get-go. And this brings us to the most important point of all. The real genius of this blueprint isn't just the topics it picks. It's the process it lays out. It's all about building your understanding step by step, layer by layer, instead of just tossing a definition at you and hoping it sticks. So how does this blueprint actually pull it off? How does it bring words to life? Well, it's all about turning them from something dry on a page into a living, breathing concept. Okay, let's take a word like hegemony. Here's your classic dictionary definition. I mean, it's accurate, it's correct, it tells you what the word means. This is the way we've all been taught to learn new words, right? But let's be real for a second. Is that memorable? Is reading that one sentence going to make hegemony a word you actually use? For most of us, nope. It just doesn't have those little hooks our brain needs to hang on to it. Now watch how the blueprint fixes this. It doesn't throw the definition away. It just says, that's step one. From there, it builds out. It gives you synonyms. Then it shows you how the word is used in a real sentence. And finally, it brings out its secret weapon, a scenario-based dialogue. This part right here, this is the absolute game changer. The instruction to include short scenario-based dialogues. This is the one step that takes it from a boring old lesson and turns it into something you can actually experience. So why is that so powerful? Well, because dialogues take a huge abstract idea like hegemony, and they ground it in something our brains are wired to understand, a simple conversation between people. It gives the word a voice, a personality, a situation. It makes it concrete, and because it's concrete, it's suddenly memorable. But this blueprint isn't just about the words themselves. It also gets that how we see information is every bit as important as the information itself, and that's where visual clarity comes into play. The instruction is so simple but so smart. Use elegant visuals and minimal text for clarity. And listen, this has nothing to do with making things look pretty. This is a strategic move, and it's backed by the science of learning. I mean, this says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you've got a total wall of text. It's just cognitive overload. Your brain doesn't even know where to start. On the other side, it's clean, it's focused, it's easy to absorb. Which one do you think is going to stick? So again, this is not just an aesthetic choice, it's a scientific one. By keeping the text to a minimum, the blueprint lowers the cognitive load, which is just a fancy way of saying it makes less work for your brain. That frees up all your mental energy to focus on the actual idea, not on trying to read a novel on a slide. So after we've taken this whole master plan apart, what have we actually learned? Let's boil it all down to the key principles that make this thing work so well. Here they are. First, context is king. A word without it is just noise. Second, scenarios create memory. They turn ideas into stories. Then you've got to go from abstract to concrete to make things feel real. Fourth, simplicity aids focus. You got to cut the clutter. And finally, when you put it all together, you get true immersion, and that's what leads to deep understanding. So, this is a fantastic blueprint for learning new words, no doubt. But it leaves you with a really big, interesting question, doesn't it? If this method works so incredibly well for something like vocabulary, what other complex subjects or skills or big ideas could we master if we just applied these same principles?
All right, today we're going to break down a skill that is honestly essential for just about everything: how to build a rock-solid, persuasive argument in French. We're going to go piece by piece so you can walk away from this ready to construct your points like a pro. Okay, let's get into it.
We've all been there, right? You're staring at a blank page and you have to write something persuasive. That question, ready to build an unbeatable argument, can feel, well, a little intimidating, but it really doesn't have to be. The secret isn't some kind of magic writing ability. Nope, it's all about having a solid plan.
And that's exactly what we're going to talk about. I want you to start thinking of yourself as an architect, and what every good architect needs is a blueprint. We're not just, throwing words onto a page here. We are consciously and carefully constructing an impressive, solid structure from the ground up. So where does any construction project begin? With the foundation. And in the world of arguments, your foundation is the thesis statement, or la thèse. It is, without a doubt, the most critical part of your entire piece. Everything, and I mean everything, is built on top of it. So what is this thing, really? Well, the thesis is the core idea, the main opinion you're setting out to defend. To put it even more simply, it's your direct answer to the question you were asked. It's not just a statement of fact. It's your specific, arguable point of view on a topic. Now, for a thesis to be a strong foundation, it has to have these three qualities. First, it's got to be clear, super clear, no confusion. Second, specific. It can't be some vague, general idea. It has to be focused. And third, and this is the big one, it has to be disgustable. It has to be debatable. Think about it. If no one can possibly disagree with you, you don't have an argument. You just have a fact. Okay, our foundation is poured and solid. What's next? It's time to erect the pillars that are going to hold up the whole structure. These are your arguments. Each one is like a heavy-duty, load-bearing column designed specifically to support the full weight of your thesis. And here is a fantastic, almost foolproof, three-step formula for building each one of those pillars. Step 1, affirmer. State your main idea. Your topic sentence. Step 2, prover. Prove it. You've got to back it up with evidence. A fact, a quote from a text, a statistic. And finally, step 3, explique here. You explain how that proof actually supports your claim. And this is key, how it links all the way back to your main thesis. That last step is the glue. All right, you ready for a pro-level move? A good architect doesn't just put up walls. They add reinforcements to make sure the building can withstand any pressure. That's exactly what a counterargument does for your essay. Trust me, acknowledging the other side doesn't weaken your case. It actually strengthens it. It shows you've thought about all the angles and you're ready for anything. So here's the strategy. A counterargument is where you bring up an opposing point of view, but you do it so you can immediately shut it down. You acknowledge it and then you refute it. It's a power move. It shows the reader that you're confident and that your position is the most reasonable and well-thought-out one. Think of it like a 1-2 punch. First, on the left, you have the contra phase. This is where you fairly and honestly present the other side's opinion. You can't make it sound silly. Then bam, the second punch on the right, the refutation. This is where you show exactly why that opposing view is flawed or maybe just less important than your own point. It's incredibly persuasive. Okay, we've seen the blueprint. We've looked at all the raw materials. Now it's time to put on our hard hats and take a tour of a finished building. Let's walk through an example to see how all of these pieces come together in practice. Just look at how this table lays it all out. It's perfect. The topic is social media's impact. The thesis in the intro takes a clear negative stand. Then look at argument 1. That's our first pillar. It claims a link to cyberbullying and then proves it with a statistic. Then you see the counterargument. It brings up the fair point about supportive communities, but then immediately refutes it by highlighting all the negative content. And finally, the conclusion wraps it all up and hammers that thesis home one last time. You can see the whole blueprint in action right there. We have one last crucial element to add to our construction project. It's the thing that holds it all together. See, if your arguments are the bricks, then the logical connectors are the cement. They create a smooth, logical flow from one idea to the next, guiding your reader through your argument without them ever getting lost. And this table here? This is your toolkit. You wouldn't use a hammer for every single job, would you? It's the same idea here. If you're adding another point, you grab a word like de plus. If you're showing why something happened, you use car. If you're explaining a result, you go for donc. And for that counter-argument, you need cependant. Using the right word is so important for making your logic crystal clear.
So, let's do a final check of our blueprint. To build an argument that can't be knocked down, you need these 4 things. 1. A solid foundation. That's your thesis. 2. Robust pillars. Your well-built arguments. 3. Intelligent reinforcements. Your slick counter-argument. And 4. The perfect finish. Those smooth connectors that tie it all together beautifully.
And there you have it, the complete architectural plan. That blank page isn't an obstacle anymore. It's a construction site, and you're the one in charge. So the only question left to ask is, what amazing argument are you going to build?
All right, let's talk about something that can totally transform your French, making you sound way less like you're reading from a textbook and much more natural. Today, we are going to demystify one of the most powerful tools in the French language, the conditional tense. So here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with why it's the ultimate politeness tool. Then we'll see how to build it, put it into action, sidestep some common mistakes, and finally get into the deep stuff, regrets and what-ifs. Okay, so first up, why is this tense such a big deal? Well, in French, it's pretty much your secret weapon for navigating any social situation gracefully. It's the difference between just stating facts and actually, connecting with people. It just adds that layer of courtesy that's so important in the language. Picture this. You're in a beautiful Parisian cafe. You really need your morning coffee, but you don't want to be that tourist who comes off as rude or demanding. So what do you say? What's the move? And here is where the magic happens. On the left, you have je veux un café. I mean, it's grammatically correct. It means I want a coffee. But it can sound pretty blunt, almost like an order. But then look at the right. Je voudrais un café. It's like a politeness filter. That one little change instantly softens the whole thing. It's a total game changer. All right, so how do we actually make this incredibly useful tense? Well, you're going to love this because it follows a really straightforward formula. No sweat. Seriously, think of it like snapping 2 Lego bricks together. It's a simple 2-step process. First, you grab the verb's infinitive, the full to-do something form. For most verbs, that's your base, your first Lego brick. Then you just click the right ending onto it. And what are those endings? Check these out. If you've already learned the imperfect tense, the l'imparfait, you're in for a treat because these are the exact same endings. Yep, really. You don't have to learn a whole new set. You're just recycling something you probably already know. Okay, I know what you're thinking. What about the irregulars? French loves them, right? Well, here's more good news. The stems you need for the conditional are the very same ones you use for the future tense. So for avoir, it's are. For être, it's ser. Once you nail these common ones, you've honestly unlocked a huge chunk of the language. So, we know how to build it. Now for the really fun part. Let's unleash its superpowers and see what this tense can actually do for you in a real conversation. We already know it's a rock star for making polite requests, but that is just scratching the surface. It's also perfect for giving advice tactfully, without sounding like a know-it-all. It's your absolute go-to for any what-if scenario. And, get this, you can even use it for reporting information you're not 100% sure about, like rumors. It's like the Swiss Army knife of French tenses. Let's zoom in on one of its biggest jobs, creating those hypothetical if clauses. This is a classic combo. You just have to know. The formula is always the same. The if part of the sentence, the C clause, uses the imperfect tense, and the result, the then part, uses the conditional. If this were to happen, then this would happen. Let's see that formula in action. Si j'avais, see that? Avait is imperfect. That's our hypothetical setup. And the result? J'achèterais une nouvelle voiture. There it is. Achèterais is our conditional. If I had more money, I would buy a new car. See how they work together? Perfect. Okay, let's talk about a couple of common traps that even advanced learners can fall into. If you can avoid these, your French is going to sound so much more polished. These are the real pro tips. All right, lean in for this one because it is super subtle but absolutely crucial. Look at the ending for the je form. For the future, it ends in I. For the conditional, it's es. I know. They sound almost identical when you say them, but that tiny little S changes the meaning completely. From I will speak to I would speak. That's a huge deal. And here it is, the big one, the golden rule. If you remember one thing, make it this. You never, ever use the conditional tense in the C clause itself. Never. That part of the sentence always gets the imperfect. So it's si j'étais riche, if I were rich. It is not si je serais riche. That's the number one mistake, and if you can avoid it, you'll be way ahead of the game. Ready to level up? Let's talk about the past. This is where we get into the really cool stuff, exploring alternate histories, talking about things that would have, could have, or should have happened. So how do we build this thing? Well, if you already know the passé composé, you're basically halfway there. It's the same idea. You take your helping verb, avoir or être, but you put that verb into the conditional. Then you just add the past participle of your main verb. Simple as that. So j'aurais plus fait gives you j'aurais fait. I would have done. And this is probably the most common way you'll hear it used. This is the classic way to express regret or give advice about something that already happened. Aurait dû means should have. It's the perfect phrase for all those hindsight is 20/20 moments. You should have left earlier. We've all been there. And here's the whole shebang, a full past hypothetical. This is for talking about impossible scenarios in the past, things you just can't change. The if part, si j'avais su, means if I had known. That's our unreal past condition. And the result, j'aurais agi autrement. I would have acted differently. That's our past conditional delivering the imagined outcome. So I'm going to leave you with a little food for thought, something to get you practicing right away. Think about this for a second, in French if you can. If you had known then what you know now, what would you have done differently? It's a powerful question, right? And the amazing thing is, you now have the grammar tools to answer it. Pretty cool. On s'est déjà demandé comment une toute petite phrase peut, en fait, contenir toute une culture. Eh bien, certaines expressions françaises, ce sont de vrais trésors. Elles ne livrent leurs secrets que si on regarde un peu au-delà des mots. Alors allons-y, plongeons ensemble dans cet univers fascinant. Alors, pour commencer, une question simple. Que veut dire « tomber dans les pommes » ? Si on prend ça au pied de la lettre, ça veut dire « eh bien, tomber dans des pommes ». C'est complètement absurde, non ? On s'imagine tout de suite en train de trébucher dans un verger. Mais alors, qu'est-ce que ça cache, vraiment, cette image ? Et la voilà, la réponse. Le contraste est assez énorme et plutôt drôle en fait. D'un côté, on a une image super fruitée et de l'autre, un malaise, quelqu'un qui perd connaissance. C'est précisément ce décalage, ce fossé entre les deux qui rend ces expressions si uniques. Oui, c'est exactement ça, le cœur du sujet. Cet écart immense entre le sens littéral des mots et ce que la culture ressent, c'est une vraie mine d'or. C'est pile là qu'on commence à découvrir les petits secrets d'une langue et, bien sûr, des gens qui la parlent. Bon, allons explorer ça d'un peu plus près. La langue française, elle adore utiliser des images, disons, surprenantes, et très souvent, elles sont liées à la nourriture pour parler de sentiments que, finalement, on connaît tous. Ce qui est génial avec celle-ci, c'est la variété. Avoir la pêche, la patate et même la frite. On dirait que n'importe lequel de ces aliments peut donner une énergie folle. C'est une manière, on peut le dire, assez savoureuse de dire que tout va super bien. Ah, le fromage, bien sûr, c'est un vrai pilier de la culture française. Mais attention, ici, il ne représente pas le plaisir, non, il représente le drame. Quand on dit de quelqu'un qu'il en fait tout un fromage, ça veut dire qu'il transforme un tout petit problème en une affaire d'État. C'est l'image parfaite de l'exagération. Et une autre, se prendre un râteau. Rien que l'image. La citation ici le dit très bien. Aïe, ça capture parfaitement ce que l'on ressent quand on se fait rejeter. C'est soudain, douloureux et un peu embarrassant. L'image est un peu violente, un peu ridicule aussi, mais elle tape en plein dans le mille. C'est toute la force des mots pour décrire une expérience qu'on a tous plus ou moins vécue. Et les animaux alors ? Eh bien, parlons des chats. Un petit chiffre pour le contexte. En France, en 2017, on estimait qu'il y avait 13,5 millions de chats de compagnie. C'est énorme. Du coup, ce n'est pas très surprenant de voir que nos amis les félins se sont invités dans pas mal de nos expressions. En voilà une, par exemple, qui est très très courante. Donner sa langue au chat. Ça veut simplement dire qu'on abandonne, qu'on arrête de chercher la réponse à une devinette. C'est une phrase qu'on entend tout le temps avec les enfants et ça montre bien à quel point le chat a une place spéciale dans notre imaginaire. Mais au-delà de l'humour et des images amusantes, il y a des expressions qui sont de véritables fenêtres sur la culture. Elles nous donnent de vrais indices sur une certaine façon de penser, un état d'esprit qui est parfois perçu comme très français. Alors là, on a un concept qui est célèbre pour être quasi intraduisible, l'esprit d'escalier. L'image derrière est juste parfaite. C'est ce moment où on pense enfin à la réplique parfaite, à la réponse géniale qu'on aurait dû donner. Sauf qu'on est déjà en train de descendre l'escalier pour partir. C'est trop tard, le moment est passé. C'est fascinant quand on y pense, non ? Le simple fait qu'une expression existe pour ça en dit long sur l'importance qu'on accorde à la conversation, à la répartie, aux mots d'esprit dans la culture française. C'est comme si, en donnant un nom à cette frustration que tout le monde connaît, on lui donnait ses lettres de noblesse. Maintenant, attention. Et si on découvrait qu'une phrase qui a l'air aussi banale que « les carottes sont cuites » cache en réalité une histoire incroyable, une histoire de drame et même de rébellion. Oui, accrochez-vous bien parce que son évolution est juste spectaculaire. Alors, regardons cette chronologie. Au début, au XVIIe siècle, les carottes, c'est un truc de pauvre. L'expression est associée à la misère. Au XIXe, ça évolue. Ça veut dire que quelqu'un est en train de mourir, que c'est la fin, qu'il n'y a plus aucun espoir. Et puis, tout bascule. Juin 1944, Radio Londres, à la BBC, utilise cette phrase comme message codé pour la résistance. Elle annonce ni plus ni moins que le débarquement, un tournant majeur de l'histoire. Et ce n'est pas tout. Elle a même été réutilisée plus tard comme signal dans un autre contexte politique tendu. C'est là que c'est incroyable. La même phrase est passée du sens « c'est fini » dans le sens le plus désespéré du terme à « ça y est, on y va », un cri de ralliement, un message révolutionnaire. Elle a complètement inversé sa signification. Ça prouve à quel point le langage est une matière vivante qui peut être façonnée par les grands moments de l'histoire. Alors au final, qu'est-ce que tout ça nous révèle ? Eh bien que ces expressions, elles sont beaucoup plus que de simples petites curiosités linguistiques. En fait, ce sont des morceaux de notre ADN culturel. On y trouve notre histoire, notre humour, notre manière de voir le monde. Donc si on devait résumer ce petit voyage, qu'est-ce qu'on retient ? D'abord que la traduction littérale, bien souvent, elle passe complètement à côté de la plaque. On a vu ensemble comment des images un peu folles peuvent décrire parfaitement nos émotions. Comment des mots intraduisibles révèlent en fait ce qui est important pour une culture. Et enfin, comment une phrase toute simple peut porter en elle tout le poids de l'histoire. Et pour finir, je me pose une question pour ouvrir la discussion. Parce que, évidemment, chaque langue a ses propres trésors, ses propres images uniques qui en disent tellement. Alors, quelles sont ces expressions intraduisibles dans d'autres langues et qu'est-ce qu'elles nous apprennent sur leur culture ? C'est une réflexion qui, finalement, ne fait que commencer. Et si on rendait nos histoires en français, bien beaucoup plus fluides, beaucoup plus vivantes, c'est exactement à ça que sert le discours rapporté. C'est vraiment l'outil clé pour raconter une anecdote, pour partager une conversation, bref, pour devenir un pro de la narration. Allez, c'est parti, on décortique ça ensemble. Alors voilà notre plan de match pour aujourd'hui. D'abord, on va voir les bases tranquillement. Qu'est-ce que c'est le discours rapporté ? Ensuite, on va s'attaquer au gros morceau, le cœur du sujet, la fameuse concordance des temps. Puis, on verra les petits ajustements de temps et de lieu. Et bien sûr, à la fin, on met tout en pratique, histoire que tout ça devienne un véritable réflexe. Bon, on plonge dans le vif du sujet. Le discours rapporté, au fond, c'est ni plus ni moins que l'art de raconter. C'est simplement le fait de redire ce que quelqu'un a dit, mais avec ses propres mots. Et en fait, on l'utilise absolument tous les jours, la plupart du temps sans même s'en rendre compte. Tiens, cette question, on se la pose tout le temps, non ? Un ami nous raconte quelque chose, et hop, on veut le répéter à quelqu'un d'autre. C'est pile à ce moment-là que le discours rapporté entre en jeu. On passe du statut d'auditeur à celui de narrateur. Regardez bien la différence ici. À gauche, on a le discours direct. Là, c'est simple, on est un peu comme un magnétophone, on cite mot pour mot, avec les guillemets. Marie dit « je suis fatiguée ». À droite, c'est le discours indirect. On intègre ces paroles dans notre propre phrase. Marie dit qu'elle est fatiguée. On sent bien que c'est beaucoup plus fluide, beaucoup plus naturel dans une conversation, non ? Donc pour faire simple, le discours rapporté, c'est quand on rapporte des paroles, mais sans faire un copier-coller. Et pour ça, nos outils un peu magiques, ce sont des verbes introducteurs comme dire que, demander si, etc. C'est cette petite mécanique qui va tout changer et c'est la base de tout ce qui va suivre. Parfait. Maintenant que les bases sont posées, on va faire notre premier pas. On va commencer par le cas de figure le plus simple, le plus courant. Une fois que celui-là est maîtrisé, je vous promets que le reste semblera beaucoup plus logique. C'est vraiment la clé pour prendre confiance. Et voilà la règle d'or, la toute première à retenir. Si le verbe qu'on utilise pour rapporter est au présent, par exemple « il dit », alors aucune prise de tête. Le temps du verbe qu'on rapporte ne bouge pas. Il ne change absolument pas. C'est aussi simple que ça. Prenons un exemple concret. Paul dit « je vais au cinéma ». Comme le verbe « dire » est au présent, on n'a rien à faire sur le temps du verbe de Paul. « Vais » reste au présent. La seule chose qui change, c'est le pronom.
je devient il, pour que ça colle à notre narration. Logique, non?
Bon, maintenant qu'on est bien échauffé, on passe au niveau supérieur. C'est le cœur du réacteur, le truc qui fait toute la subtilité et l'élégance du français. La concordance des temps. Ça peut faire un peu peur au début, mais promis, si on y va étape par étape, ça va devenir limpide.
Et voici la règle qui change la donne. Dès que notre verbe pour rapporter est au passé, il a dit, elle pensait, eh bien toute la phrase qu'on rapporte doit faire un voyage dans le temps. Le temps du verbe original doit faire un pas en arrière. C'est comme si on rembobinait un peu la cassette.
Alors ça, c'est la diapositive à garder en tête, un véritable mémo. Observez bien ce glissement. Le présent, hop, il recule vers l'imparfait. Le passé composé, qui est déjà dans le passé, recule encore plus loin, jusqu'au plus que parfait. Et le futur, lui, il se transforme en conditionnel présent. C'est ce petit voyage dans le temps qui fait toute la différence.
Premier cas concret. Elle a dit « je suis contente ». Au moment où elle parlait, c'était du présent. Mais nous, on le rapporte après coup. Donc son sentiment est maintenant dans le passé de notre récit. Logiquement, son « je suis » se transforme en « qu'elle était ». Le présent a glissé à l'imparfait. Et si l'action qu'on rapporte était déjà au passé? Par exemple, il a dit « j'ai fini mon travail ». L'action de finir était déjà passée quand il l'a dit. Alors quand on le rapporte, il faut pousser cette action encore plus loin dans le passé. Le passé composé recule donc jusqu'au plus que parfait. Il a dit qu'il l'avait fini. C'est ce qu'on appelle le passé du passé.
On a fait le plus dur. Vraiment, c'était les verbes. Maintenant, c'est la touche finale, le petit détail qui va rendre le récit parfaitement cohérent et naturel. On doit aussi ajuster les marqueurs de temps et de lieu. C'est ce qui fait que tout sonne juste à l'oreille.
Tout est une question de perspective. C'est logique en fait. Si quelqu'un dit « je pars demain », et qu'on raconte ça 3 jours plus tard, le mot « demain » n'a plus de sens. Il devient le lendemain. Pareil pour hier, qui devient la veille, ou aujourd'hui, qui devient ce jour-là. On recalibre simplement le GPS temporel de notre histoire.
Bon, à cette théorie, on passe à la pratique. C'est le moment d'assembler toutes les pièces du puzzle qu'on vient d'étudier. On va prendre une phrase complète et la transformer ensemble, étape par étape. C'est un peu comme un jeu de construction, vous allez voir.
Pour être sûr de ne rien oublier, voici une petite checklist en 4 étapes. 1. On regarde la phrase de départ. 2. On ajuste le pronom. 3. L'étape cruciale, on décale le temps du verbe. Et 4. Le coup de polish final, on ajuste le marqueur de temps ou de lieu. En suivant cet ordre, impossible de se tromper. Allez, voici notre défi. Il a dit « je partirai demain ». On analyse rapidement, on a le verbe « a dit » au passé. Ça, c'est le signal qui nous dit « attention, il va y avoir des changements ». On a le pronom « je », le verbe au futur « partirai » et le marqueur de temps « demain ». On a tous les ingrédients pour appliquer notre méthode. Et voilà le travail. Il a dit qu'il partirait le lendemain. On décortique ? Je est bien devenu « il ». Le futur partirait à reculer pour devenir du conditionnel présent, partirait. Et enfin, le demain s'est logiquement transformé en le lendemain. Chaque règle a été appliquée, la phrase est impeccable. Voilà, toutes les clés sont sur la table. Le discours rapporté, ce n'est pas juste une règle de grammaire un peu compliquée, c'est bien plus que ça. C'est ce qui nous permet de passer de simples rapporteurs de faits à véritables conteurs. C'est l'outil qui donne de la vie, de la couleur à nos souvenirs, aux conversations qu'on partage. Alors, la vraie question maintenant, ce n'est plus comment raconter, mais plutôt, quelle est la prochaine histoire qui mérite d'être partagée?
On a tous déjà eu cette impression, non? En lisant un titre de journal en français, on est frappé par sa concision, sa puissance. Eh bien, il y a un secret derrière ça. Un outil linguistique qui transforme des phrases un peu longues en déclarations super percutantes. Et aujourd'hui, on va percer ce secret ensemble.
Tenez, premier exemple, c'est direct, c'est rapide, ça plante le décor tout de suite, il n'y a pas un seul mot de trop.
On continue, deuxième exemple, et c'est la même chose. L'action est mise en avant, on saisit l'info principale en 1 seconde. L'impact est immédiat.
Et là, c'est encore plus fort. 3 mots, juste 3 mots, et ça suffit à nous faire ressentir toute l'urgence de la situation. C'est d'une efficacité redoutable.
Alors la question c'est, comment est-ce possible? C'est quoi ce tour de magie qui permet de condenser autant d'infos et de créer un tel impact avec si peu de mots?
La réponse, elle tient en un seul mot, la nominalisation. C'est ça la clé de ce style si direct. Alors, c'est parti, on va décortiquer ce concept ensemble.
La nominalisation, qu'est-ce que c'est au fond? C'est tout simple, c'est l'action de transformer un verbe ou un adjectif en un nom. Et le but, c'est de rendre la phrase plus courte, plus dense, plus directe. C'est un véritable outil de précision linguistique.
Regardez, cet exemple est parfait pour comprendre. D'un côté, on a une phrase classique avec un sujet, un verbe, les médecins manifestent.
De l'autre, une formule beaucoup plus punchy. Manifestation des médecins. On sent tout de suite le style journalistique, pas vrai? Et ça marche aussi avec les adjectifs. Les températures sont douces devient douceur des températures. Le résultat est, je trouve, plus élégant, un peu plus formel. Ici, c'est l'adjectif douce qui a été transformé en nom, douceur. Ok, maintenant qu'on a compris le pourquoi, on va passer au comment. Parce qu'il y a des règles, des sortes de schémas pour construire ces noms à partir de verbes ou d'adjectifs. L'idée générale, la plus fréquente, c'est d'ajouter une terminaison, ce qu'on appelle un suffixe, à la racine du mot. Ces suffixes, c'est un peu comme des briques de construction qui changent la nature du mot. Pour les verbes, on voit des modèles très courants. Par exemple, le suffixe ation transforme narrer en narration, ou encore ement pour passer de enseigner à enseignement. C'est un mécanisme assez régulier en fait. Et pour les adjectifs, eh bien, c'est la même logique. On a des suffixes comme heure qui fait de large la largeur, ou it pour passer de fidèle à fidélité. Une fois qu'on commence à les repérer, on les voit absolument partout. Mais attention, ce serait trop facile si c'était toujours aussi simple. Parfois, la transformation est un peu plus profonde, et c'est la racine même du mot, ce qu'on appelle le radical, qui change. Ce sont les petites exceptions à connaître. Reprenons à nos exemples du début qui est très parlant. Le verbe découvrir ne devient pas découvrition. Non, ça devient la découverte. Le radical a été modifié. C'est une de ces irrégularités qu'il faut mémoriser. Connaître les règles, c'est bien. Mais ce qui est vraiment intéressant, c'est de comprendre l'impact concret de cette technique. Alors, voyons un peu ce fameux pouvoir de la concision en action. Alors, au final, pourquoi tout ça est si important? D'abord, parce que ça permet de créer des titres qui claquent, qui sonnent pro. Ensuite, ça peut fusionner deux phrases en une seule formule bien plus élégante. Et de manière générale, ça rend l'expression à l'écrit comme à l'oral beaucoup plus sophistiquée. Regardez cet exemple. Au lieu de dire en deux temps « Baptiste est malade, cela l'empêche de sortir », on peut condenser tout ça en une seule phrase bien plus fluide. « La maladie de Baptiste l'empêche de sortir ». Le résultat est plus direct, plus chic, non? Bon, à cette théorie, c'est le moment de mettre les mains dans le cambouis. Essayons un peu. Comment est-ce qu'on pourrait transformer la phrase qui suit en un vrai titre de journal?
Alors voilà la phrase « Le musée de la ville a été incendié hier soir ». Prenez une petite seconde pour y réfléchir. Comment la rendre plus percutante?
Et voilà, la version nominalisée, ce serait « Incendie du musée de la ville hier soir ». Le verbe « incendier » devient le nom « incendie » et hop, on a un titre de presse parfait. Excellent! Allez, un dernier pour bien maîtriser le concept. La phrase est « Un homme a été agressé par un gorille au zoo du Prado ». Et le titre devient « Agression d'un homme par un gorille au zoo du Prado ». Ici, le verbe « agresser » s'est transformé en nom. Agression, c'est exactement ce style efficace et direct qu'on cherche à obtenir. Maintenant que le secret est dévoilé, la vraie question c'est où d'autre est-ce qu'on peut observer cette puissance de la nominalisation à l'œuvre? Si on ouvre bien l'œil et qu'on tend l'oreille, on se rend vite compte qu'en fait, elle est absolument partout.
So, let's talk about one of the most exciting and, yeah, sometimes pretty intimidating parts of speaking French, the art of the debate. By the time we're done here, you're not just going to have the tools to keep up, you'll be able to jump into any French discussion with real confidence.
You know that feeling, right? You're in a conversation with French speakers, it's moving a mile a minute, opinions are flying everywhere, and it's so easy to just feel, well, left behind. But here's the thing, getting the hang of this isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's a skill. It's kind of like a conversational dance, and today, we're going to learn all the steps.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by understanding what makes French debates tick. Then we'll build our skills from the ground up, starting with agreeing, then diving into the real heart of it, how to disagree politely. After that, we'll get into some pro moves for steering the conversation, and finally, we'll pull it all together into a toolkit you can start using right away.
Okay, first things first, you've got to understand that in France, a good debate is basically an art form. This isn't just a coincidence, it's deep in the culture. It comes from this long history of philosophy and an education system that really values clear, persuasive arguments. So it's not really about winning an argument, it's more about exploring an idea together. It's actually a sign of respect and engagement. Now, where do we start? Well, it might sound a little strange for a debate, but the most powerful place to begin is actually with agreement. Finding that common ground right at the start shows you're actually listening, and it builds this foundation of respect before you even think about introducing a different point of view. So, let's talk about l'accord, agreement. This is so much more than just saying yes. You should think of it as a strategic tool. When you agree with something someone says, you're creating rapport. You're validating their point, which, trust me, makes them way more open to hearing what you have to say next. And here are some of your go-to phrases. You've got a range of options here. You can keep it simple and direct with je suis d'accord. Or, if you really want to show enthusiasm, you can go with absolutely. And for really strong validation, vous avez tout à fait raison is perfect. Think of these as your keys to unlocking the conversation. And you can just see how smoothly this works in a real chat. Someone says, French cinema is booming. Instead of just a nod, the other person jumps in with absolument and then adds to it. Just like that, they've made a connection and made the whole conversation stronger.
All right, let's get to the real core skill of any great debater, disagreeing. This is where the magic really happens. In French culture, challenging someone's idea is often a huge sign of respect. It proves you're genuinely engaged with what they're saying.
So the secret sauce is this concept of les désaccords polis, or polite disagreement. This is not about starting a fight, it's about intellectual curiosity. It's the art of separating the idea from the person, which lets you challenge a point without making things personal or tense. It's a really, really valued skill.
Now let's look at some key phrases. Just notice how gentle these are. Je ne suis pas tout à fait d'accord means I don't entirely agree. It leaves all this room for nuance. And something like je vois les choses un peu différemment, I see things a bit differently, is so soft and personal. These phrases signal you're about to change direction, but without slamming on the brakes.
I mean, look at this. The difference is night and day, right? On the left, c'est stupide. That's a conversation killer. It's an attack. But on the right, je ne partage pas cet avis. Well, that's an invitation. It's about your perspective, not their intelligence, and it keeps the door wide open for more discussion.
So let's see it in action. Imagine someone makes a huge claim, like technology isolates us. Instead of just a flat no, the response is, I see things a bit differently. And then it's followed by a counterpoint. See how elegant that is? It's respectful, and it keeps the debate moving forward in a really productive way.
All right, time for the advanced moves. Once you're comfortable agreeing and disagreeing, it's time to learn how to actively manage the flow of the conversation. This is all about taking control when you need to, but, doing it with grace.
I know, interrupting can feel so rude, but sometimes it's just necessary. This little three-step process is your best friend. First, you apologize. Then, you make your point really concisely. Something like, I would just like to add that. And then, this is the crucial part. You hand the conversation back. It's a quick, surgical move, not some hostile takeover.
Another superpower in these conversations? Knowing when to ask for clarification. And listen, this is not a sign that you weren't paying attention. It's actually a sign that you were listening so closely that you want to understand every single detail. It shows deep engagement, and it also stops you from arguing against the point the other person wasn't even making. And this is such a pro move. Check it out. Someone says, we need a radical solution. I mean, what does that even mean? It could mean anything. By asking, what do you mean by radical exactly, you force them to be more specific, and that takes the conversation from these vague ideas to a really concrete discussion. It's a brilliant strategic move. Wow, we have covered a lot of ground. From building bridges with agreement, to politely disagreeing, and even steering the conversation. So now let's pull everything together into one powerful summary that you can take with you. This is that moment where everything we've talked about just clicks into place. This is the foundation that's going to help you become a much more confident speaker in absolutely any French conversation you find yourself in. And boom, here it is, your French debate cheat sheet. This is your toolkit right here for every goal, agreeing, disagreeing, interrupting, clarifying. You now have a solid go-to phrase. Seriously, if you can master these 4, you will be ready to handle almost any situation that comes your way. So really, the only question left is, what are you going to talk about? It doesn't matter if it's movies, technology, or the best kind of cheese. You now have the tools to engage confidently and, most importantly, respectfully. The art of French debate, it's not a challenge anymore. It's an opportunity. So go start a conversation.
All right, today we're going to crack the code on professional French. If you've ever dreamed of working in Paris, Montreal, or Geneva, then using the right words can be your absolute superpower. Think of this as your playbook, giving you the confidence to own those crucial career moments. Look, you've got the skills, you've got the ambition, but Does the thought of a job interview or, leading a meeting entirely in French make your palms sweat a little? Hey, you're not alone. We're going to tackle that right now. So let's treat this as your personal toolkit. We're going to go over the key phrases and, maybe more importantly, the cultural need-to-knows so you can absolutely thrive in a French-speaking office. You ready to jump in? First things first, the job interview. In French, that's l'entretien d'embauche. It's your first big test, and trust me, every single word counts. Okay, this is huge. Formality is absolutely key in a French professional setting. You always start with vous. This isn't just about grammar. It's a huge sign of respect. Using the informal tu or a casual salut right off the bat can come across as pretty disrespectful. So stick with bonjour monsieur or bonjour madame until they, and only they, invite you to be more casual. Let's break this whole thing down into 3 manageable chunks. If you can nail these 3 parts, you're going to come across as a polished, confident professional. So after your polite bonjour, you want to show that you're genuinely happy to be there. Try je suis ravi de vous rencontrer. That means I'm delighted to meet you. Or a really great one is merci de me recevoir aujourd'hui. Thank you for having me today. Simple, polite, perfect. Now, when it's time to talk about what you bring to the table, be clear and confident. You can start with j'ai de l'expérience en to state your background. To get into the details, use mes responsabilités principales incluaient. And if you really want to highlight a specific skill, you can say je suis particulièrement doué pour. Remember, an interview is a two-way street. Asking smart questions shows you're not just looking for any job, you're interested in this job. For instance, asking pourriez-vous m'en dire plus sur l'équipe shows you're already thinking about being a team player. Or try something like quels sont les plus grands défis pour ce poste? That shows you're strategic. Hey, you got the job? Awesome. But now the real work begins, right? The day-to-day stuff, like mastering emails and meetings. This is the heart of office communication. And you guessed it, just like that interview, getting the formality right in your emails is a total game changer for building strong professional relationships. So, a good rule of thumb, when you're writing to your boss or a new client, stick to the formal stuff. Open with cher monsieur and close with cordialement. But for colleagues you work with every day, a more relaxed bonjour Marie and closing with bien à vous is usually perfectly fine. This one is so important. Politeness is everything. Think of the conditional tense as your secret weapon for making requests. Just swapping the very direct je veux, I want, for the much softer j'aimerais, I would like, changes the entire tone. It turns a demand into a respectful request. It's all about that cultural fluency. All right, you've mastered emails. Now let's walk into that meeting room. How you participate in these reunions can really define your success. If you're the one leading the meeting, here's how you start strong. Commençons, l'ordre du jour est le suivant. It's direct, it sets a clear agenda, and it shows everyone you're ready to get down to business. Want to show you're on board with an idea? Je suis tout à fait d'accord avec cette proposition is your go-to. It's a strong, positive way to build consensus and keep the momentum going. So, how do you disagree without being disagreeable? It's a fine art, and this phrase is your paintbrush. Je comprends votre point de vue, mais pourrions-nous considérer? You show respect for their idea first, then you introduce your own. It keeps the whole conversation productive. And to finish things up and make sure everyone's on the same page, this is your go-to. Pour résumer, nous avons décidé de. It clarifies the next steps, and honestly, it's a great leadership move. All right, now for the big one, the presentation, or la présentation. This is your moment to command the room and really show them what you know. You know, the secret to a killer presentation is just having a clear roadmap. Kick it off with a simple intro. Use transition words like premièrement, ensuite, and finalement to walk your audience through your points. And then stick the landing with a strong conclusion and a confident opening for questions. And here's a pro tip. Don't try to sound like a dictionary. Seriously, clear and confident language is way more impressive than using a bunch of complicated words nobody understands. The goal is to communicate, not to show off your vocabulary. So we've covered the interview, the emails, the meetings, the big presentation. What's the one thing that links all of this together? What's the real secret? It really just boils down to one word: preparation. Real confidence isn't about being flawless or never making a mistake. It's about being ready. When you master these key phrases, you build a foundation that lets you stop worrying about the words and start focusing on your message. What you have now is a complete toolkit for those make or break moments in a French-speaking job. You are totally ready to make a killer first impression and build an amazing career. So the real question is, what are you going to do with this? What's that next big career goal you're going to achieve? Because the language isn't a wall anymore. It's the door. Now go open it.
All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest challenges in mastering French, figuring out not just what people are saying, but what they actually mean. We're going to crack the code and start you on the path to becoming a true French communication pro. I'm sure you've been there, right? You're following along, you know every single word, but you walk away with this nagging feeling that you just missed the real conversation. It's super common, and trust me, you're not alone. Today, we're going to solve that mystery together.
Okay, let's take this classic little phrase, "a pas mal." Literally, it just means not bad. But depending on how it's said, it could mean a lukewarm, it's okay. It could mean, wow, that's actually really good. Or it could even mean, that's incredible. So, how in the world do you tell the difference? Okay, so our first tool in the Decoder Toolkit is all about understanding what the French call l'implicit. And really, it's the art of what is not said. It's all about reading between the lines.
So check out this little exchange. Person A asks, "Are you coming to the party tonight?" And person B replies with, "I have a big day tomorrow." So what's the real answer here? They never said yes or no.
And there it is. See, person B never actually says the word no. They just give a reason that leads you to that conclusion. And this is so key in French culture. Often, the stated reason is the answer. It's actually a really common and polite way to say no without saying no.
So, how do you spot this in the wild? Well, here are your decoder clues. Keep an ear out for those indirect answers. You know, when someone gives you a reason instead of a straight-up yes or no, that's a huge red flag. Also, listen for little phrases like en fait, which means actually, or disons que, which is like let's just say. They're often a little heads up that the real meaning is about to follow. All right, tool number 2. And this one, it's a biggie. Irony. It is everywhere in French conversation. And you know what? Once you get the hang of spotting it, it's actually a lot of fun.
So I want you to picture this, okay? It is absolutely pouring down rain outside, a total deluge. And your friend looks out the window and says, "What magnificent weather for a picnic."
It's a total mismatch, isn't it? The words are positive, magnificent weather, but the reality, the context, is completely negative. That, right there, is the heart of irony. They mean the exact opposite of what they're saying. It's a playful way to complain about the awful weather.
So, your irony spotting checklist? It's pretty straightforward. First, look for that obvious contradiction between the words and the situation. Second, listen for super positive, exaggerated words like génial, super, or magnifique being used when things are clearly not so magnificent. And finally, pay close attention to the tone of voice. It might be totally flat, or maybe even a little overly dramatic.
And you know, that last point about tone, it brings us perfectly to our final and maybe most important tool, tone of voice. This is where the real magic happens, because the exact same words can mean completely opposite things, all depending on how they're said.
Let's take a super simple phrase, c'est une bonne idée. On paper, it means it's a good idea. Simple enough, right? But is that what it really means? Well, let's have a listen.
Okay, first up, listen to it said like this. C'est une bonne idée. You hear that? The tone is upbeat, it's energetic, it's sincere. There's absolutely no doubt that the person genuinely thinks the idea is good. The words and the meaning are perfectly aligned. But now, what if you hear the exact same words said like this? C'est une bonne idée. Whoa, totally different feeling, right? That flat, hesitant, maybe slightly drawn-out delivery, it completely flips the meaning on its head. What they're really saying is, that is a terrible idea. So really, the best way to think about tone is like the emotional soundtrack for the words. It's the attitude and feeling the speaker brings, and it can either double down on their words or contradict them completely. It's a layer of meaning you just can't afford to miss.
So there you have it, 3 absolutely essential tools for going beyond the literal translation.
And just like that, you are officially equipped to be a French nuance decoder. Let's boil this all down into a super simple 3-step process you can use in your very next conversation. Step 1. Analyze the context. Is there a mismatch, like praising the weather during a downpour? Step 2. Listen to the tone. Is it sincere? Is it sarcastic? And step 3. Listen for those little clue words that signal you need to dig a little deeper.
And look, the reason this is all so important is because in French, just like in any language, the real conversation, the good stuff, the humor, the actual connection, it almost always happens in that space between the lines.
So the next time you're in a French conversation, give it a shot. Don't just hear the dictionary definitions. Listen for the context, listen for the tone, and hunt for those hidden clues. There is a whole new world of meaning just waiting for you to discover it.